Hey everyone, today I'm doing an oil change on a 2016 Honda HRV. Now I believe this is the same procedure for all these first generation HRVs up to 2021. I don't believe Honda has made any changes with these cars. You can change the oil with the car on the ground. It's a little tight though. For most people, it's probably not going to be feasible to fit under the car. So you're probably going to want either jack stands or ramps. If you have ramps, just make sure when the car is up and situated, you both set the parking brake, and if you have wheel chocks, it's not a bad idea to chock the rear wheels for safety purposes. So once the car's off the ground, you have a lot more room, and this is a pretty straightforward oil change. As far as what you're going to need, obviously a drain pan for the old oil and filter. I got this from Home Depot. I like this pan. It's nice and wide. With all my various vehicles, this can reach both the sump drain and the oil filter housing at the same time, so I can use one pan to drain everything and save a little bit of time. To get the drain off the oil sump, you need a 17mm wrench or ratchet. And then to get the filter off, I'm just going to use my universal strap wrench that I use for all my various vehicles. This should fit under there. I shouldn't really have a problem with this, but there are lots of options for removing oil filters. And then I usually always keep a box of disposable gloves, since you tend to get a little bit messy doing this. Keep my hands nice and clean. And then as far as what you're going to need for the oil and filter, I always run synthetic oil in all my vehicles. This HRV specifically takes 0.20 oil, so pretty common weight now. The manual states that this car takes 3.9 quarts with the filter change, so a 5-quart jug is plenty. You're going to have a little bit left over for next time. And then the filter itself, lots of options for filters, same with the oil. I'm going to go with a Wix. I think Wix makes a very good quality filter. The part number for the HRV is 57356. So like I said, pretty straightforward oil change. This is not very complicated, so we'll go into the car and get started. All right, under the car, I'll get the rear sump going first. That's going to take a little bit longer. So 17mm. For purposes later, the torque spec on this is 30 pounds, so that's pretty snug for a oil drain sump, but that's what Honda specifies. So you want to try to run this out as much as possible and then bring it away quickly so you don't make a mess. Just a little bit, but not too bad. It's not a bad idea to place the crush washer on here. I don't always do it. If it's leaking, I'll do it, but this one was not leaking. It was pretty solid. It's in good shape, but if you want to do it, it's up to you, but it's not a bad idea. So I'll just put that to the side in the pan, and I'll let this drain. So then as far as the filter itself, it's a little large under here with this universal strap wrench, but it should still work without a problem. So I should be able to just bend this out of the way slightly and then turn it, hold it. Oh wow, that came off pretty easy. So all right, there wasn't a ton of torque on there, so that's didn't take a lot to crack that loose. Like I said, with the nice part about these larger, oh yeah, there we go. Nice part about these larger pans, I can drain both of these at the same time. Less tends to spill because it's got a large surface area to grab a lot of the oil. So this sits up and down, so I will be able to pre-fill most of this filter. I'll probably pre-fill it about 3/4 of the way when I put the new one on. With these manufacturers, with these spin-on filters, typically do not provide a torque spec because you do not want to use tools to put spin-on filters back. With cartridge filters you can, but not with spin-ons. They are hand tight only when they go on. So you don't want. So we're done with that strap wrench for now. So like I said about using gloves, why it's not a bad idea. Typically you're going to get some oil on your hands. So I'll let this sit for a few minutes and drain, and I'll start prepping the new filter. And when you get the old filter off, make sure that the old gasket comes off with this. So you can see the old gaskets here. If you do double gasket an oil filter, it's not going to seal and it's going to blow oil everywhere and make a mess, and you're basically going to have to do the oil change again. So just keep that in mind when the old filter comes off. All right, while the car is finishing up draining, I'm just going to pre-fill the filter, which you can do with the spin-on style filters. Now when you start to pour it in, you'll notice that the level drops significantly. That's because the pleating inside the filter is absorbing the oil. If a little bit comes up like that, that's fine. It usually drops down pretty quickly. I'm going to try to fill this up about 3/4 of the way because it has a little, oops, a little oil. It has a little bit of an angle on it, so there's no reason to fill it up all the way so it's less spilled. So that should be good enough. And then a little bit of the oil from spilled on the side. Just go ahead and put a nice fresh ring of oil in the gasket so it comes off much easier and is less likely to stick when it's time to take this off for the next oil change. So I'll let that finish draining and then I'll put this on. It also says on the side of the filter itself, they recommend it's upside down, but 3/4 of a turn by hand once the filter makes contact with the housing. That's pretty typical. Usually most manufacturers, usually 3/4 to 1 full turn. Again, do not use a wrench to put this on. You can over torque it and deform the gasket, and then it will not seal correctly. So hand tight only for spin-on style filters like this. So we'll go ahead and get buttoned up and put the oil back in the car. All right, the sump drain bolt is back on. Again, 30 pounds of torque if you have a torque wrench, and you can place the crush washer, especially if it's leaking. Some people do, like I said, every oil change. If it's leaking, I'll do it, but usually they're good for a while. So we're just gonna go ahead and put the filter back on. Before we put the filter back on, make sure the mating surface where the filter goes on is nice and clean. Take a nice clean rag, wipe that off. You may get a little bit of crud on the edges. That's just because the filter gasket doesn't go all the way to the end. That's normal. But like I said, just give it a nice, thorough wiping so there's no debris on there and you get a nice tight seal with the gasket. And when you look at that, you obviously can see that the original gasket is off. So again, 3/4 to 1 full turn. Once it makes contact, don't go crazy. Do not put a wrench or tool to put this back on. So all right, nice and snug. Any residual oil under here, make sure you wipe up. You're going to get some here, some ran down here. So you don't think that there's a leak, but it's just residual oil leaking from when you did the change itself. And then finally, we need to go fill the engine up, run it to make sure there's no leaks, and top it off to make sure we're at the correct level. All right, time to refill the car. Most of these 5-quart jugs have little gauges on the side of them, so we know this is rated for 3.9. This is a 5-quart jug, so we should have a little bit more than a quart left by the time we're done. With cars, you're better off putting in a little bit less than too much. You don't want to overfill these because if you overfill them, you're going to have to drain some out. So never ever, this might seem pretty benign and simple, but never run the engine without oil in it. You can do catastrophic damage fairly quickly. And never run the engine, the car, with the oil cap off. That instantly will make a mess. I've seen it done before. It's not pretty. It covers the entire engine in oil. So I'm pretty close here. Yeah, that's pretty close. It's good enough for now. Like I said, always go a little bit less than too much. It's supposed to take 3.9, but I have owned several cars where they have taken a different amount than the manual specified, so I always go by the dipstick. So now that I have a sufficient amount of oil in the car, go ahead, run the engine, let the oil system pressurize itself, make sure I have good oil pressure, make sure there's no leaks, and I'll take the car off the ramps, let it sit in the ground for a few minutes, and let the oil run back down so I know exactly where the oil level is, and I will do small adjustments from there just to make sure that the level is perfect. All right, so I ran the car for about 30 seconds while I was up on the ramps. Checked for leaks, everything looked good, no problems, backed it off the ramps. Now we're on the ground, so it's a little bit easier to reach. I let the car sit for about 5 minutes, let the oil run down into the sump. I'm about half a quart low, so I'm slowly going to keep adding a little bit of oil and checking it. So I should have about a quart left over when everything is said and done. So I'll let this sit again for another about 5 minutes, let that run all the way down into the sump, and then check again. If you're not already aware, this is the oil dipstick for checking the oil level inside of the engine. So just pull straight out, and then on here, these hash marks will basically grab onto the oil to let you know the top of the hash marks are where you want to aim for. That's going to be the maximum full line. That's where you want to be. You want to have the most amount of extra oil left inside the engine. So let that sit for a few minutes, and I will double check it again. All right, I think I have this completely full. So one last check, remove the dipstick. Just make sure you use a rag, preferably a clean rag, and Wipe off the dipstick, reinsert it, make sure you go all the way down, past the O-rings, let it sit for a second, remove it, and there we go. That is perfect, right to the top of the hash marks here. So now the car has the correct amount of oil in it, and this oil change is complete after I put the cap back on. I'm also going to do a separate video, how to reset Honda's maintenance minder, which basically resets that little wrench symbol, and it will reset the oil percentage. I will link that at the end of this video, as I will be doing that separately. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.